So today we're going to make these Swedish meatballs in the air fryer, which are a way easier way to do it than the traditional deep frying the meatballs. Less mess and pretty quick too. So here's how it's done. So to make these meatballs, first thing, I've got one medium onion here, and I'm going to just get that on the stove with about 30 grams of butter in order to get that frying. Now, I've got 4 slices of white bread here. This is just Wonder Bread. I've taken the crusts off. I'm going to cut this into cubes. That's going into a bowl with half a cup of milk. We're just going to let that soak for about 10 minutes or so. So you can see the milk is absorbed, the onions are done, so now we're actually going to make the meatballs. I'm using a food processor here. You can also use a stand mixer with a paddle attachment, but I figure most people probably, more people have a food processor than a stand mixer. And for this, it uses both beef and pork. This recipe is based on Daniel Gritzer's recipe in Serious Eats, so I'll link that below. He uses relatively high fat pork and beef, which was difficult for me to find. So I'm making it with lean beef and lean pork. The key here is that it's 2/3 beef, 1/3 pork. His recipe uses a little bit more than I actually had, but I'll put all the proportions for mine down below. So we want to get the pork and the beef into the food processor. And to that, we're going to add our other ingredients. So I've got 2 eggs here. I've got basically 1/8 of a teaspoon of allspice, about 1/4 of a teaspoon of white pepper, and about 12 grams of salt, kosher salt here. So I'm going to add that in there. I'm going to add the bread. And finally going to add the onions. So you can see here the onions are nice and soft, a little bit brown, and that just brings out the sweetness. I sauteed them in a wok because it makes less mess, but obviously you can use any pan you want. Now we're just going to pulse this. Just going to give this a little bit of a mix. Looks like it's being incorporated pretty well. Now, in Daniel's recipe, he actually uses sautés half the onions and puts half in raw. I actually forgot to do that. I just cooked them all. So anyway, that would be something you might want to try if making this. And I would say we are done. So now what we want to do with this mixture is actually make the meatballs. So here I've got a cookie sheet with some parchment. I've got a tablespoon measure here, but you don't need to use that. You can just do it by hand if you want. And I'm going to put these out, then I will roll them sort of at the end and make meatballs. So now I've got the meatballs all rolled out, and so once I scooped them, I just used wet hands and gave them a quick roll. They're all roughly the same size. I've got a preheated air fryer here, and now what I'm going to do is pop these in here. I will have to do this in 2 batches, but this certainly is a lot cleaner than deep frying them, which is the way I normally do it, which makes it for a delicious meatball, but it's fairly messy. So we won't crowd that too much. Just gonna give it a spray with some oil. It's very lean meat, so you can use the fat. And now we'll throw that in the the air fryer. You can see these are starting to look good, getting nice and brown. So I think the air fryer is a good option here. Okay, look at this. That's after 10 minutes, nice and brown. I checked the internal temperature, and they're all around 190 or so. So those are done. Now I'm going to take these out, just let them rest a bit, and now we will put these ones in. Little spray, and there you go. Now we're going to make the gravy. So let's get the roux going. So I'm going to preheat a pot. This, we're adding a couple tablespoons of butter. So that butter is foamy. We've got 3 tablespoons of flour here that we're going to whisk in. Just cooking that for a minute just to get the raw flour smell out of it. Now we have 2 cups of chicken stock, so I'm just going to whisk that in. We'll bring that up to a simmer. And for flavoring, we're going to add a teaspoon of soy sauce, and half a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. Just bringing that to a simmer so it finishes thickening. I'm going to turn it down. Let's get a little taste for seasoning. And I'm going to add some more white pepper. And some salt. Stir. Give that another taste. That's good. So now to this we add our meatballs. So here's the first batch that we had. And the air fryer has finished with the other batch, so let's just get those in there. Stir that up. We'll just let that simmer for a bit, for a few minutes, while I get ready to plate. So here is the finished product, and it is delicious. So we've got nicely browned meatballs. Gravy is great. I'm serving it with a little bit of cranberry sauce because I can't find lingonberry jam at my local grocery store, and a little bit of parsley. So this is a really easy, low mess way to do it using the air fryer, and I hope you give it a shot. Thank you.